So there you go. There were just a few tiny niggles that I had really with the pump and the system as a whole, but I have to say that they pale into insignificance when you compare them to the results and the user interface improvements on the 640G, those few extra button presses aside. So let's have a look at some of those. Basal patterns, lovely. I really like the fact that your basal patterns can now have names, work day and day off, and sick day, things like that. Things to help you remember which one's which, rather than having to keep a mental note of which one pattern A and pattern B is. So that's really, really useful. The way that temp basals can now be set in 15-minute increments rather than only in half hours is great, and as is the fact that when you adjust them, they go in 5%. Just makes it cuts the button pressing down by so much, and brilliant also that if you dial all the way down to 0, you can just press and hold and it goes down to 0. So when you're trying to do a do-it-yourself smart guard, as I've been doing since I've not been running sensors, then dialing it down to 0, it doesn't then flick around and start at 100 again, which might be useful in some circumstances, but actually when you want either or of the extremes, it can be quite unfortunate if it just keeps scrolling round and round. When you'd set a temporary basal on the Veo, on the hour, every hour, it would make this noise. There you go. For no reason at all. Through the night, if you set a temporary basal, it will be chirping away and disturbing you. But on the 640G, silence. And the best thing is that at the end of the temporary basal, when you actually wanted to be told, and the Veo would keep stonily silent, the 640G now gives you a little beep to let you know the temp basal has finished, which is perfect. To be honest, I would choose this pump on that feature alone. Really good too that if you do start a temp basal, you get the little bracketed T there to show you that a temporary is running. If you're running a fancy bolus, a dual wave or a square wave, then that will be bracketed either S or D over here. So again, this home screen is really, really well thought through and useful. The active insulin being there is great. It means you haven't got to dig in. All you've got to do is to turn the pump on. And that's a thing that you get access to without unlocking the pump. And it makes such a difference when you get those interactions that you don't need to unlock it. Partly that's what makes having to unlock it every time a little bit more frustrating. It's a tiny thing, but I love the fact that all of the alert tones on the MiniMed640G are now slightly different, because subtly and without you really even realising it, you get to recognise what they are. So when it's set change reminder, it sounds different to you haven't actually pressed the final confirm button on that bolus. And all of the ones on the Veo use the same tone, and actually it meant that you could disregard something as I accidentally pressed a button, and now it's telling me that I haven't delivered a bolus I never intended to deliver, where actually what it was trying to tell you was low battery alert. So the fact that the alert tones are now using different tones and different beeps, the end of a temporary basal rate now has a tone, but it's one beep. And so you pick these things up, and it doesn't mean that you're currently constantly thinking, what was that? And looking down at the pump, because you sort of know it's about the right time for that to happen. And if it is alert, which really does require you to take action, you're more likely to look at it and less likely to think, oh, I know what that is, and ignore it. Another really nice user-friendly addition to the way this works. So if I just set a manual bolus going with the Veo, and I don't know what happens on other pumps to be honest, but with the Veo, if you were in the middle of delivering a bolus, the delivery on the Medtronic pumps is nice and gentle. It doesn't all whack in and make the set sting. You can do it over a really nice gentle period of time. I think you can choose the speed, but by default I tend to set it relatively as a relatively relaxed delivery, because I find that more comfortable. But on the Veo, if you did that, you then had to wait until it was finished before doing anything else. So if you wanted to set a temporary rate, you had to remember to do them in the right order. But with the 640G, you can start delivering that bolus there, and it tells you that it's started. And then you can come across here and set a temp basal at the same time. So there you go. And it's amazing how often tiny things like that. I'm actually going to stop that bolus because I don't need it. I unplugged before I started filming this, but that was just an experiment. But I don't really want me to squirt insulin over the desk. But yes, it's amazing how often small adjustments like that make a significant difference to the experience of using a pump. I found the screen visibility in sunlight on the 640G really good. Compared to some other diabetes devices I've used, for a colour screen it was excellent. I never had a reason to use it during my 64 days with this MiniMed640G, but actually I really like the fact that with the new Contour Next Link USB meter, you can deliver boluses from the meter straight from without having to get the pump out. You know, I can't think of many opportunities that I would have to use that, but you know, skiing holiday if it was really buried, or if it was inside a wetsuit or something like that, or a dry suit, or you know, women on a wedding day or something, or wearing a dress where just getting the pump out and accessing it is a real inconvenience. Just having the ability as a sort of backup is really useful. Straight boluses, you can give any number of units. If you want to do a more complex dual or square wave bolus, you have to predetermine the number of units, which kind of makes it less useful to my eye. It would have been lovely if you could have just predefined a split of dual and square wave, and then been able to dial in the number of units. You know, 60-40 over 2 hours I use quite a lot with a whole range of amounts of units. But even just the regular boluses, being able to just access that direct from the meter, although I wouldn't use it, clearly I don't use it a lot, knowing that it's there, I think it's really worth having. Again, not something I've had particular cause to experiment with, but I love the fact that the Medtronic 640G is now guaranteed as waterproof. It's rated to, I think it's IP7 or it might be IP8. It's one of those properly waterproof ones where you can dip it in a glass of water and not worry about your pump instantly frying. I think you can even go swimming with it actually, but you would need to check the manual. But certainly it's gone from being splash proof to more properly waterproof, which is just, it's a reassurance, you know, against accident, falling in off the key on holiday, things like that, where you don't expect to take a dunking and you haven't, you know, unhooked to go swimming or whatever. So again, good to know. The biggest love, perhaps unsurprisingly, is SmartGuard. Of course it is. For me, with the accuracy I got off the sensors, which was really good, SmartGuard worked brilliantly. Overnight, over the entire 9-week period where I was wearing the sensors, I had no readings under 3.5, none at all. And I had almost no readings, well hardly any, that just dipped under the 3.9. So it's a transformation really in terms of the amount of time, particularly when you think of these graphs which I showed in my hypoglycaemia post, with the amount of time that I was spending low, and this is when I've got, you know, sensors on. This is a Libra sensor, and I'm trying to avoid it, and I'm trying to correct those basal errors and problems overnight, and I'm still spending a lot of time overnight in hypoglycemia and not knowing about it. So to have SmartGuard actively watching and actively helping me out, I can't tell you, it's completely different, and it makes me feel safer going to bed, and it gives me confidence to avoid actually highs, because I know that I've got SmartGuard to catch me as long as I don't go mad. If I'm expecting a late rise from a meal, I can chance an extra bolus, knowing that SmartGuard will have the ability, as long as it's not too big a correction, to catch that and prevent an overnight dip into lower levels, while if I have guessed it right and the meal is late arriving and it does peak, it means I don't spend all night at 12. I'm spending it more in range. And yet I'm also at the same time protected from dipping under and going low. So yeah, overnight SmartGuard worked brilliantly. In actual fact, if you take my experience as a whole, if I take 5 lots of Libra sensors worth of data, on these reports it gives you a number of low events and an average duration. So if I add up over 5 lots of sensors, that's 10 weeks, the total number of minutes I'm low, and then using these little cheeky ones from CareLink, where it gives you totals of minutes down the bottom, I can compare like for like really. I can average it down and say how many minutes a day on average when I'm wearing this 24-hour sensor am I below 3.9, and when I'm wearing the SmartGuard and the MiniMed640G am I below 3.9, and the results are really quite impressive. For me, and it is only me, it won't work this way necessarily for everyone, but my experience is that SmartGuard reduces my overall time spent in hypoglycaemia, well, in low blood glucose, sub 4, by 90%. And as I say, 100% of overnight, I didn't go below 3.5. So 90% reduction in levels below my ideal range. That's really pretty impressive stuff. And the real benefit to it is, of course, that it's those better results and no more effort, really. You do have to watch, as with all continuous glucose monitoring, you have to watch the number of alerts you're getting for alert fatigue and slight irritation, but over the course of a period of wearing the sensors, it's quite easy to massage that and manage that and strike the balance between better results and not getting irritated by excess nagging from the sensors and you know, high alerts and low alerts. Coincidentally, I've got a pump clinic coming up in a few weeks' time, so I've just had my HbA1c done, which has fallen by 1/3%. That's not huge, but it's down from 6.3 to 6%. I can't do it in the new numbers. Sorry, I'll have to put that up on screen. Sorry, I still can't get used to it. I always think in percents. It's too many years in the old way. But yeah, so a 90% reduction. Let's go over this again, because even I find it. I've been thinking about this for a while, and it's really hard to get your head around. A 90% reduction in time spent below 4, and a 0.3% reduction in HbA1c. Well, that's the sort of magic bullet, isn't it? Isn't that what you want? A lower HbA1c and fewer hypos. And that's what the SmartGuard system has given me. But here's the kicker. I think, I will talk to my clinic about it, but I am already pretty sure that that level of improvement is not going to be available to me full time. I can't afford to fund the sensors myself, and the NHS can't afford to finance CGM for people who don't really need it. Now, I'm not a person who has severe hypoglycemia anymore. I've managed to crack that. I used to in the old days, but in the last perhaps 4 years, none at all, and in the year before that, maybe 1. So I've cracked that by working and doing a lot of data crunching and put a lot of effort in, and I don't mind doing that. And I'm really pleased that my family no longer have to live with somebody who wakes up half a dozen mornings a year completely la-la. The offset of that is, and of course, I'm not somebody who seems to struggle particularly with ketones. I was talking in a Twitter conversation the other day, and actually I still find urine strips suit me fine for ketone analysis. I appreciate they're not as quick as blood strips, they're not as accurate as blood strips, but actually it's only once or twice a year I need to check, and then generally I get trace or none. So it doesn't really seem worth me going for the sort of proper keto monitoring, because I don't seem to get ketones at the rate that some people clearly do. So I don't go into hospital and need to get sorted out for DKA. So actually, as far as the NHS's pot of money is concerned, I don't have those expenditures to offset sensors. And the sensors and the transmitters are so expensive that they're really out of my reach. You know, it's a couple of years worth of sensors, that's what we pay for our last car. So I can't justify the expense of full-time sensors, and I can't expect the NHS to justify the expense of full-time sensors, even though the results are transformative. Now, I don't know how long it will take for the cost of sensors to reduce. I've been waiting and hoping, and Medtronic have just released details of a loyalty scheme where you get a little bit of money off. So if I did go for the 640G, I would probably try to get some sensors some of the time. But with a CGM with a transmitter, you have that big pot of money, 500 quid or something, that if you don't use it regularly enough, it goes out of its 12 months and then that's it. And you know, I'm not quite sure how long it will keep going unless you're using it relatively regularly. So the technology is there, and the technology, for me anyway, works brilliantly. But it's just too expensive, which is a real kicker.
You can't always get what you want. You can't always get what you want. But if you try sometimes, well, you might find you get what you need.
So there you go. That's the end of my time with the MiniMed640G. I'll get it boxed up and sent back to Medtronic with very many thanks. It's been a really brilliant experience. I've had quite a lot of fun making these. I hope they haven't been too tiresome to watch. And if I can think of anything else, maybe I'll put another video up. But for now, thank you ever so much for watching. If you've got any comments or questions, do leave them below. But otherwise, have a really good day, and I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.